In the center of the galaxy, inside a grand hall made of crystal and gold, the Galactic Council was holding another meeting. The room was full of different alien species, each proud of their power, their history, and their technology. They came from powerful empires, planets with cities in the sky, armies of machines, and ships that could jump across light years in seconds. Among these proud voices, the name humans came up once again. A tall, thin alien with glowing skin laughed. "Humans, again," he said. "They are nothing. They still use metal tools and live in stone houses. They send small ships into space like children throwing stones into the ocean." The room echoed with laughter. Others joined in, adding their own jokes about humans. One alien said humans still use fire to cook their food. Another claimed that Earth people still believe in magic and wear clothes made from animals. A third said they once saw a human trying to fix a spaceship with tape and rope. The Galactic Council did not take humans seriously. They were a joke, a background species, weak, slow, unimportant. The Tsan Empire, the strongest military force in the galaxy, had taken control of several human colonies. They didn't need to use full force. They landed ships, gave orders, and the humans obeyed. No fight, no war, just silence. The Tsan were confused at first. Then they were pleased. It was easy. The humans became workers, miners, farmers on alien colonies. They followed orders. They stayed quiet. They worked hard, and they never protested. Over time, the Tsan forgot the humans were even there. Commander Zivak was one of the few who paid attention. He was a senior officer in charge of security on Colony Zeta-9, one of the planets where thousands of humans were working. Every day, he watched them through the cameras. They worked in the mines, built structures, moved supplies. They didn't complain. They didn't resist. But something about them felt strange. Zivak couldn't explain it, but it was there, quiet eyes that didn't show fear. Movements that were too calm. Faces that watched everything too closely. One evening, he saw a group of human workers standing in a circle after their shift. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. They were just standing, looking at the sky. Zivak zoomed in with the camera. They were watching the stars. He didn't know why, but it made him feel cold inside. He reported his observations to High Command. "The humans on Zeta-9 are acting unusual," he said. "They are too quiet, too focused. It feels like they're waiting for something." The reply came quickly. "You worry too much," said General Carvox, his superior. "Humans are simple creatures. You've seen their cities, their ships, their weapons, nothing special. Even their planet is barely alive. They are good for hard labor and nothing else. Let them look at the stars if they want. It means nothing." Zivak didn't agree, but he stayed quiet. He was a soldier, and orders were orders. A few days later, everything changed. The warning alarms screamed across the colony. Sirens filled the sky with noise. The ground control center picked up a large object entering orbit, fast, silent, and unknown. It didn't send a signal. It didn't match any known ship design. Not Tsan, not Galactic Council, not Pirate. It was something new. The scanners couldn't get a full reading. The object was covered in a strange black coating that blocked most sensors. All they knew was that it was big, almost 5 times the size of a Xan destroyer. It had no flag, no identification marks. It just floated above the planet like a silent moon. Zivak ran to the command deck. Officers were shouting. Screens were blinking red. Communications were down. The defense grid was confused. No one had ever seen anything like this ship. One officer managed to get a visual on the main screen. The image made the entire room go silent. The ship was shaped like a spear, long and sharp, with red lights running across its body like veins. Strange symbols were written along its sides. Some of them looked human, but others were unknown. Its engines glowed with quiet power. It made no sound, but its presence was louder than a scream. Then, a voice spoke across all channels. Deep, clear, and cold. "This is the Terran revenge," it said. "Leave the humans alone." The command deck froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Terran. That meant Earth. That meant humans. Zevak stared at the screen, his heart racing. A human warship. But that was impossible. The humans didn't have ships like this. They barely had working fighters. They didn't have cloaking. They didn't have weapons that could scare Exxon battleship. And yet, this ship was real. It was here. And it wasn't afraid. The Terran warship did not move. It just stayed there, hanging in the sky above Colony Zeta-9 like a dark shadow. It didn't fire. It didn't send any more messages. But its silence was louder than war drums. Everyone on the colony felt the pressure of its presence. It was like the air had become heavier. Like something very old and very dangerous had just opened its eyes. Commander Zevak stood frozen on the command deck, watching the strange ship on the main screen. No one in the room knew what to do. They had never seen this kind of ship before. The Tsar Empire had studied thousands of alien species, but nothing like this was in the records. This was not a stolen design. It was not copied. It was human, and it was built for one reason: war. Zevak ordered the scanners to analyze the ship, but the systems started glitching. The data made no sense. The readings showed weapons, but not like any that Khan had seen before. Energy levels were too high. Heat signatures too steady. No weak spots. No blind sides. The ship was alive with quiet power, and it wasn't trying to hide it. One of the officers panicked and called in a defense squadron. 5 Dawn fighter ships launched from the hangar and flew toward the Terran ship. Their lights blinked bright blue, and their weapons were ready. Zevak watched them rise into the sky, thinking maybe this strange human ship would respond with a retreat or a signal. It didn't. The Terran warship waited until the fighters came close. Then, with no warning, it opened fire. There was no sound, only a flash. A single red beam sliced through the sky like a knife through water. All 5 Ahan fighters vanished in a second. No explosion, no debris, just gone, erased from the sky like they were never there. The control room fell into silence again. Zevak's mouth went dry. His hands were cold. That weapon, whatever it was, wasn't just strong. It was precise. Perfect. No one in the galaxy had weapons like that. Not even the old machines of the Broken Core Empire. Not even the ancient solar cannons of the Talari. This was something new. The warship still didn't move. It was sending a message without words. Don't test us again. Across the colony, the human workers looked up at the sky. They saw the ship. They heard the voice. And they understood. This was their signal. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Many of them stopped working and stood in silence. Some dropped their tools. Others simply watched the sky with eyes full of something that Xan had never seen in them before. Hope. In the command center, another message came in from the Terran ship. This time, it was visual. A hologram appeared above the central console. It showed Earth, blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. Then it showed human cities, full of lights and machines. It showed humans training, fighting, building. It showed massive factories deep underground, ships being built in silence, far from the eyes of the galaxy. The voice returned. You thought we were weak, it said. You thought we were slow. You thought we would never fight back. You were wrong. Zevak stared at the hologram. His officers stood frozen, their eyes wide. This was not a lie. This was not a trick. The humans had been preparing. Not for 1 year. Not for 10. For decades. In the Galactic Council, humans had always stayed quiet. They asked few questions. They signed small trade deals. They sent polite diplomats. They never showed aggression. No one thought they were building ships. No one thought they had weapons. No one thought they were dangerous. But humans were patient. They had watched. They had learned. They had taken the insults, the slavery, the pain. And now, they were ready. Zivak turned to his officers. "Send a message to High Command," he said. His voice was low and tight. "Tell them Earth is not what we thought." Before the officer could answer, the screens changed again. This time, a new object entered orbit. Then another. Then 5 more. 10. 20. More ships. All Terran. All silent. All ready for war. The sky above Colony Zeta 9 turned darker as more Terran warships appeared one by one. They didn't make noise. They didn't flash lights. They just came quietly and surrounded the planet. Each ship looked different. Some were long and sharp like spears. Others were wide and flat like shields. But they all had the same black surface, glowing red lines, and the same silent message. They were not afraid. Commander Zivak stood on the command deck, frozen. The number of ships was growing fast. 20, 30, then 50. No one had ever seen a human fleet this size. No one even thought such a thing could exist. The Tarn Empire believed they knew everything about human technology. They were wrong. Zivak gave the order to power up the planetary defense grid. Large cannons hidden in the mountains rose and aimed toward the sky. Shields activated around key buildings. Fighters prepared to launch again. The Tarn soldiers were trained to face any threat. But as they looked up at the Terran fleet, fear showed in their eyes. The main Terran ship, the one that had come first, sent no message this time. Instead, it began to move. Slowly, with full control. It floated above the Tsan command center and stopped. Then it fired. A beam of light fell from the ship like a straight line from heaven to earth. It touched the Tsan base's outer shield and passed through it like the shield wasn't even there. The ground shook. The base's main tower exploded in silence, turning into dust. There was no fire, no pieces, no warning. One moment it was there. The next it was gone. Screams filled the command center. Officers shouted. Sirens wailed. Zivak watched the screen as the Terran ship moved again, this time pointing toward the defense cannons on the mountain. Another shot. Another beam of red light. The mountain exploded. The cannon was gone. He had seen many wars. He had seen entire cities destroyed by awful strikes. But this was different. This wasn't just destruction. It was control. Precision. The Terran ship didn't fire many shots. It only fired when needed. It didn't waste energy. It didn't chase. It simply erased threats one by one. Down in the colony, the humans began to move. They had waited long enough. Groups of workers, thousands of them, left the mines, factories, and dorms. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They walked together with calm steps. Some carried tools. Others carried nothing. They didn't look afraid. They looked ready. The Tsan guards shouted commands. They pointed guns. They tried to stop them. It didn't work. The humans attacked without hesitation. They were strong, fast, and smart. They used their tools like weapons. They fought with a kind of fury that Xan had never seen. They took control of the guard posts. They broke into the armory. They used Xan weapons with ease. Zivak watched the camera feeds in shock. "How are they doing this?" he whispered. They were workers, slaves. One of his officers replied in a shaking voice. They were soldiers, hiding in plain sight. It was true. These humans weren't just random workers. They had trained. They had planned. They knew the colony's layout better than the guards did. They knew where to strike, how to disable systems, and how to turn the Xan's own machines against them. Zivak gave the emergency order to evacuate. But it was too late. The main control tower exploded. Lights went out. Communications died. Outside the building, the humans had reached the walls. They were planting charges. The guards were falling one by one. And still, up in the sky, the Terran warships floated in silence. Watching. Zivak looked at the screen one last time. It showed a live feed from above the colony. From space, he could see the chaos below. Fires. Movement. Tiny figures running through the dust. And above it all, the black ships of Earth. He realized the truth too late. This wasn't just an attack. This was a message. The humans had waited. They had built their ships in the dark. They had trained their people in secret. They had learned the enemy's language, systems, and habits. And now they were taking back what was theirs. Not with words, not with peace, but with fire from above. The battle raged on across Colony Zeta 9. But it was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The humans, once thought to be weak and silent, now moved like shadows in the chaos. They were everywhere. Every corner, every building, every street. They were inside the Xan systems, taking control. The guards fought back, but they were outmatched. The humans had waited years for this moment. They were no longer afraid. Zivak stood on the command deck, watching the feed from the surface. His heart pounded. He had never seen anything like this. It wasn't just the humans fighting back. They were fighting with purpose. They had a plan. They knew exactly what to do, and they were winning. One by one, the key points of the colony fell. The Xan command center was in flames. The defense cannons on the mountains were silent. The supply lines were cut. There was nothing left for the Xan to hold on to. Zivak tried to issue orders, but the communication systems were down. Every time he tried to make contact, the Terran ship in orbit jammed the signals. And still, more Terran warships arrived. Zivak knew what was happening. It wasn't just Colony Zeta 9. The humans had spread their forces across the galaxy. Slowly, quietly, they had begun to take back their colonies. They had built their fleet in secret. They had trained their people in silence. And now they were rising. The Xan Empire had underestimated them. They had laughed at their weakness. But the humans had been waiting for the right moment. And now that moment had come. Across the galaxy, other Xan colonies began to report strange activity. They saw the same black ships, the same red lights in the sky, the same Terran warships entering orbit, the same humans, no longer slaves, no longer weak. They were rising. The forgotten people of Earth were coming back. And they weren't coming alone. The Terran fleet wasn't just made up of ships built in secret. It was made up of ships and soldiers from all corners of the galaxy. Humans who had been taken by force, by the Xan, or by other alien empires. They had fought in silence, lived in silence until now. Now they were free. Now they were fighting for each other. And they were stronger than anyone had ever realized. Back on Colony Zeta 9, the last of the Xan defenders tried to make a final stand. They gathered in the central plaza, behind barricades, weapons ready. They thought they could hold out, but they were wrong. The humans came at them from every direction. They used the Xan's own weapons against them. They took their shields, their guns, their ships, and used them with deadly precision. The barricades fell. The last line of defense crumbled. The Xan soldiers fought until the very end, but they were no match for the humans. Zivak watched the final feed. It showed the humans standing over the fallen Xan. They were silent. They didn't cheer. They didn't scream in victory. They just stood there, looking down at the soldiers they had defeated. They had waited for this. They had planned for this. They had taken back what was theirs. The Terran warship in orbit sent a final message to the Xan fleet. It was simple, direct, and final. "We're coming for the rest of you." Zivak's knees buckled. The last of his strength left him. He had watched an empire fall. He had watched the impossible happen. And now he knew that Xan Empire was finished. The humans had not only returned, they had become a force of nature. A force that would tear through the galaxy. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The war was far from over, But the message had been made clear. The Tarn Empire, once so proud and certain of their control, now faced the unimaginable. The humans, weak, quiet, and forgotten, had become something the galaxy had never seen before. They were no longer slaves. They were no longer small. They were a force to be reckoned with. Across the galaxy, the Terran fleet moved with purpose. They didn't waste time. They didn't show mercy. Every Tarn colony that had once held human prisoners was now under attack. Each time the Terran ships entered orbit, they brought with them the promise of freedom, of destruction, and of vengeance. The Tarn had taken too much. They had hurt too many. But the humans had learned. They had fought, quietly, in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. And now that moment had come. Zivak sat in his chair, staring at the endless black void outside the windows of the command deck. The fleet was gone. The colony was gone. The empire he had served was falling apart. He could still hear the screams from the surface, echoing in his mind. The Tarn soldiers he had led, the civilians they had enslaved, all had one thing in common now. They were gone, replaced by humans, fighting for their freedom. Zevak's hands shook as he placed his head in them. He couldn't escape what he had seen, what they had become. The humans didn't stop after Zeta 9. They moved across the stars, reclaiming what had been taken from them. One by one, the Tarn colonies fell. The Terran warships moved like shadows through the dark, silently destroying the heart of the Tarn's power. Planets that had been once controlled by the Kaxan now burned with the light of human ships. No empire, no matter how great, could survive against such relentless determination. Zivak received a message from the Terran fleet, the same black ship that had first entered orbit above Zeta 9. The ship's message was broadcast across the entire galaxy. It was broadcast to every empire, every race, every species. "It's not over," the voice said. "Not for us." The Terran fleet had a simple goal now: to reclaim their homeworld, Earth. To free every human held by any empire, anywhere. And they would not stop until Earth was free from every chain that held it down. The Tarn had hurt them. The galaxy had hurt them. But the Terran people were no longer weak. They were no longer small. They were a force that could never be ignored again. Zivak knew what came next. He knew the humans would not stop until they had taken back everything they had lost. The galaxy would never be the same. The Terran Empire was rising, and the old powers that ruled the stars would tremble before it. As the final wave of Terran ships entered orbit above Kahan's capital world, Zivak stood at the window. He looked at the stars, those same stars he had laughed at when the humans had looked up at them from their planet, their homes, their broken world. Now, those stars looked different. Now, those stars belonged to humanity. Zivak could not deny it. The humans had been underestimated, mocked, forgotten. But no more. The Terran people had risen, and now the universe had no choice but to remember them. Their true face had been revealed, and that face was no longer one of weakness. It was a face of strength, of power, of fury. The galaxy had just learned a lesson that would echo for millennia. Never laugh at humans.